Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room was heavy with noise, yet she sat in silence. Pages shuffled, maps clicked across the projector screen, and men's voices overlapped like an impatient storm. But her voice, it didn't count. Not here. Not yet. She traced the edge of her notepad with her finger, the ink pen resting between her thumb and palm. Small habits kept her hands steady when her chest tightened. She had been in war zones before, had crawled under fire, had waited for the shadow of death to pass over. But somehow, the stillness of a room full of men who refused to look at her was harder. It wasn't their fault, not entirely. In their eyes she was background, logistics, quiet support, the one who filed things or carried them from one place to another. They called her specialist but said it without weight. The men here carried scars across their faces, thick forearms, booming laughs. She carried something different and invisible. Still, she kept her silence. The colonel was talking fast, tapping a pen against the map. His words blurred into rhythms of urgency. The mission was unraveling, everyone could feel it. A convoy had been ambushed 2 nights ago. Satellite feeds showed movement near the border villages. Intelligence was fogged with half-truths and broken channels, and yet they were expected to move tonight before dawn burned away their cover. Men muttered curses under their breath. One leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, shaking his head at the absurdity of it. Another scribbled notes, jaw tight. A third stared into the distance as though replaying a memory he wished he could erase. And she sat unseen, until her eyes caught something. Not on the map, not in the colonel's words, something quieter, something in the rhythm of their mistakes. Her breath slowed, her fingers stilled. They were planning a route that twisted too close to the village ridge. A blind curve, narrow and exposed. The enemy would expect it. She knew because she had seen it before. Not on a map, not in training, but in the eyes of a boy, barefoot, holding a radio like a weapon, standing on that very ridge 4 months ago. She had never told them that story. She hadn't told anyone. The colonel slammed his hand on the table, pulling her back to the present. "We move in 6 hours," he barked. "Any objections?" Chairs shifted, silence stretched. She swallowed. Her chest tightened again. She could let it go. Let the men nod and march to their fate. She could stay the quiet clerk, the invisible shadow. But the memory of that barefoot boy gnawed at her. His wide eyes, too young to carry such weight. His lips had moved, whispering coordinates, sending men she once knew into an ambush. She had survived by crawling through mud, the world exploding behind her. They hadn't. She couldn't let it repeat. Her pen tapped once on the table, then again, her own signal to herself. Finally she spoke. "Sir, the ridge." The colonel's head snapped toward her. The room stilled. Men who hadn't looked at her all night turned. Her throat felt raw, but she held his stare. "They'll be waiting on the ridge." A pause, long, heavy, the kind that reveals who you are. The colonel narrowed his eyes, then leaned forward. "Explain." Her pulse hammered. She told them about the angles, the blind spot, the comms interference that would cut their signal the moment they turned. She spoke of the valley echo, how gunfire would bounce and trap them in confusion. Words poured, not from notes but from scars. When she finished, silence followed. One soldier coughed, another shifted uneasily. The colonel tapped his pen, measuring her with his gaze. "And how do you know this?" She hesitated. She couldn't tell him everything about the boy, about the night she had crawled alone. Not yet. Her secret carried too much weight. "I've studied the terrain," she said, simply, steady. He looked at her for another long beat, then slowly nodded. "Noted." The men returned to their muttering, adjusting plans, debating options. But she knew something had shifted. A small tilt, a silent ripple. And yet beneath the relief her chest still ached, because she hadn't told them the truth, not the whole of it. Later, when the room cleared, one of the younger soldiers lingered. He was barely older than a teenager, freckles still across his cheeks. His hands fidgeted as though he didn't know what to do with them. He leaned closer. You really think the ridge is a trap? She met his eyes. They were too innocent for war. I know it is. He nodded, chewing the inside of his cheek. Then, almost whispering, my brother, he got caught like that. Different valley, but same setup. He never came home. The weight in his voice was heavier than the room had been. She wanted to tell him she understood, that she carried her own ghosts, but her throat locked. Instead, she only said, that's why we won't let it happen again. When she stepped outside, the night air clung to her skin. The desert was cold after sundown, stars scattered like glass across the sky. She pulled her jacket tighter, listening. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere farther a truck engine roared. The world kept moving, unaware that tomorrow it might burn. She walked the narrow path between tents, her boots crunching in gravel. Every shadow stretched long and sharp under floodlights. She passed soldiers laughing too loud, hiding their nerves. She passed one staring at a letter, mouthing words he couldn't send. She passed another sitting on a crate, eyes shut, lips moving in prayer. Everyone carried something. Everyone hid it differently. She reached her tent but didn't go inside. Instead, she stood still, looking back at the ridge, invisible in the dark but carved into her memory. She saw the boy's face again. His whisper, his betrayal, or maybe not betrayal, maybe survival. She had never known who held the radio first or why. She only knew she had crawled away and others hadn't. Her hand trembled before she clenched it. Tomorrow they would move. Tomorrow her silence or her voice could decide who lived. She let the night settle around her, listened to its quiet, and somewhere in the silence she felt it again, the same pull she had felt in that briefing room, the certainty that her step, though small, mattered. But there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. She stood alone, but what came next, no one expected. The night before a mission was never quiet, not truly. Boots thudded on gravel, canvas tent flaps cracked against the wind, generators hummed, voices rose and fell in low murmurs. But she heard something else beneath it all. A rhythm. The way silence stretched between words, the way laughter stopped too quickly, the way men stared longer than they meant to at the sky. Fear had a sound, and once you knew it, you could never unhear it. She sat on her cot, boots still on, rifle resting against the tent pole. She hadn't slept properly in days, maybe weeks. Every time she closed her eyes, faces returned, some blurred, some sharp. Men she had trained with, men she had lost, and one boy whose eyes had never left her. The boy on the ridge. Her fingers traced the seam of her sleeve back and forth, a silent tether. She told herself it wasn't fear. Not exactly. Fear was loud, frantic, chaotic. What she felt was quieter, a kind of ache lodged deep, impossible to shake. She thought of speaking up again, of telling them more, but the thought tangled her chest. They would ask questions she couldn't answer, questions she wasn't ready for. A voice broke her thoughts. You don't look like you're sleeping anytime soon. She looked up. It was the freckled soldier, the young one from earlier. He leaned awkwardly against the frame of her tent, helmet tucked under his arm. His name tag read Carter, though she hadn't let herself remember it until now. She didn't respond right away, just studied his face. Too open, too unscarred, he shouldn't have been here. He cleared his throat. Mind if I sit? She nodded once. He dropped onto the cot across from her, setting his helmet down carefully, almost respectfully, as though afraid of breaking it. For a while, neither spoke. The air smelled of diesel and dust. Finally, Carter said softly, "You were right earlier, about the ridge. I could see it in the colonel's face." She gave the faintest shrug. "Doesn't mean they'll listen." "They'll listen," he said, with a certainty that didn't belong to someone his age. Then his voice cracked smaller. "They have to." She studied him again. First mission. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. She could almost feel his pulse, rapid and fragile from across the space. He reminded her of someone. Not the boy on the ridge, no, someone before that. Someone she'd once promised she protect. She turned away, staring at the flap of canvas that swayed gently in the night air. Get some sleep, Carter. Tomorrow will ask more of you than you think you can give. He hesitated as if wanting to say more. Then, quietly, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of freezing, afraid of letting everyone else down. Her chest tightened. She knew that fear, the kind that gnawed deeper than death itself. She almost reached out but stopped herself. Distance was safer for him, for her. Instead, she said only, the ones who admit fear usually last the longest. Remember that. He gave a small, crooked smile. You sound like you've done this before. Her silence was answer enough. When he finally left, she sat longer staring at the rifle. Not because she wanted it, but because it reminded her of everything she carried. It was more than steel and optics. It was a burden, a memory keeper, a promise she hadn't fulfilled. She closed her eyes and saw it again. The ridge, the boy, his radio pressed tight against his mouth, whispering coordinates. The thud of mortars seconds later, screams swallowed by dust. Her body pressed into the earth as fire bloomed around her. She should have shot him, she knew that. Should have ended it before his voice could betray them. But she hadn't. She couldn't. His hands had been shaking, his eyes wide with something too human to pull the trigger on. She had spared him, and because of that, men had died. She opened her eyes, heart pounding. That was the truth she hadn't told them, not the colonel, not Carter, no one. The boy had survived because of her choice. And now, every time she saw a ridge, every time she heard silence between radio calls, she wondered if he was still out there, older now, harder, more dangerous. Tomorrow might answer that question. Dawn came slow. A pale light, bruised purple at the edges, spread across the desert. Soldiers moved like shadows, strapping gear, checking weapons, muttering last words to themselves. The smell of burnt coffee mixed with gun oil. She walked among them quietly. Nobody asked her why she wasn't afraid. Nobody knew she was. The convoy lined up. Engines rumbled, drowning out thought. Dust rose behind each wheel, hanging heavy in the morning air. She climbed into the back of one of the lead vehicles, wedged between crates of supplies and the steady weight of silence. Across from her, Carter sat gripping his rifle too tight. He didn't meet her eyes. She didn't press him. The colonel's voice crackled over the comms. Orders, warnings, a speech too short to be remembered, too long to be ignored, and then they rolled forward. The desert stretched endless around them. Flat plains gave way to jagged stone, shadows lengthening as the sun climbed. She felt every bump through the steel floor. Every jolt rattled her bones. No one spoke. The air was thick with waiting. Hours blurred until the ridge began to rise ahead. Her throat tightened. The memory pressed sharp. She wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, to turn back, but her voice lodged deep. She had already warned them once. To say it again would expose too much. The vehicle slowed, dust swirling. The ridge loomed, cutting against the sky. And then a flicker. Movement small, high on the rocks. Her chest clenched. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing, heart slamming against her ribs. Through the haze of distance, she saw it, a figure, barely taller than a child, crouched with something in his hands. Not a weapon, not exactly, a radio. Her blood turned cold. Carter followed her gaze, his own breath catching. You see that? He whispered. She didn't answer, couldn't. Because in that moment time folded, past and present collided, the boy, the ridge, the radio, the choice she hadn't made. She was staring into the same scene, the same silence, the same impossible decision. And this time, she knew the cost of hesitation. But there was something else, a thought she hadn't let herself face. What if it was him? What if the boy she had spared had grown older, harder, and was standing there now, waiting to finish what he'd begun? Her hand hovered near her rifle. The convoy rolled slower. The colonel's voice came over the comms, sharp with suspicion. Eyes up, something's not right. Her pulse pounded. Her silence was breaking. She felt it, the moment pressing her forward. One step, one choice. Would she end the cycle, or would her silence speak again? The ridge loomed closer. The figure stood taller, the radio lifted to his mouth. And she knew history was about to repeat, unless she did something. She steadied her breath. And for the first time since that night months ago, she made a choice. She stepped forward. He never heard her move. None of them did. The convoy rumbled, the ridge loomed, and she stepped out of the back of the vehicle as if pulled by something stronger than reason. Her boots hit the dirt, and the world narrowed to silence. Engines faded, voices muted. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Her rifle was steady against her shoulder before she realized she'd raised it. The scope locked. Her heartbeat thundered. Through the glass she saw him, the figure on the ridge, small, still, radio pressed close to his lips. One squeeze, that was all it would take. One silent command of her finger and the mission would live. But she didn't fire, not yet. Because the scope gave her more than distance. It gave her detail, and detail was dangerous. The figure wasn't a soldier, not a hardened fighter. The boy was younger than she'd thought, thin frame, dust-streaked face, eyes wide like an animal cornered. He wasn't holding the radio like a weapon. He was clutching it like a lifeline. Her breath caught. Not again. Her mind split in two. One side screamed at her, pull the trigger, save them all. The other whispered softer, he's just a boy, he doesn't understand. The radio trembled in his hand. His mouth opened, words spilling into static. Her finger tightened. A sharp voice cut the moment. What the hell are you doing out there? The colonel's bark cracked through the comms. Soldiers scrambled, rifles lifting, eyes darting toward the ridge. The boy froze in her scope, startled by the sudden shift. And in that frozen second, before anyone else could move, she fired. The shot cracked, echoing through the valley. The boy fell. The radio tumbled from his hand, clattering against stone. Silence slammed back into place. She lowered her rifle slowly, her arms trembling though her hand stayed steady. For a moment no one spoke. Engines idled, dust hung in the air, and every eye turned toward her. Carter's face was pale. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. The colonel's voice finally broke the stillness. "Good shot," he said flatly, then sharper, "move out before his friends arrive." The convoy roared back to life, vehicles grinding forward, orders barked, soldiers shifted. The mission resumed as though nothing had happened. But everything had. She climbed back into the vehicle, her rifle across her knees. Her ears rang from the shot, but the noise inside her was worse. Her chest felt hollow, her breath uneven. She had done what she hadn't done before. She had pulled the trigger. She had ended it. So why did it feel like she had lost something all over again? Carter sat across from her, eyes locked on hers. Not accusing, not even questioning, just searching as if trying to understand what she carried that he couldn't see. She looked away. The desert blurred past the window. The ridge receded into distance, shrinking until it was nothing but memory. But memory had teeth, and this one had already bitten deep. Hours bled together, heat pressed down, radios crackled, dust choked, but her mind stayed on that single moment, the boy's eyes in her scope. She had wanted clarity, finality, but all she'd found was a deeper silence. The convoy finally slowed near the outskirts of the village. The mission's heart. Mud walls, narrow alleys, doors hanging half open like broken promises. Children peeked from behind shutters, women carried water in rusted cans, men stood with guarded eyes. They dismounted, boots struck earth in unison, weapons scanned shadows. The colonel barked positions and soldiers fanned out. She followed her unit into the square. Every sound was amplified, the flap of laundry in the breeze, the hiss of a distant kettle, the shuffle of bare feet retreating. She kept her rifle low, but her eyes moved constantly. Every rooftop a threat, every alley a mouth ready to spit fire. And yet beneath the tension she felt something else, a gaze. Someone was watching her. She scanned the windows. Nothing, turned slowly, nothing. But the feeling pressed against her spine like a finger. She caught a glimpse then, a shadow moving along the far wall, quick, intentional. Her chest tightened. She broke from formation, ignoring the colonel's order snapping in her earpiece. Her boots struck hard, faster. She turned into the alley, rifle raised. The shadow vanished. Only silence. Then a sound, a door creaked. She stepped closer, breath sharp, pushed the door open with the barrel of her rifle. Inside, darkness. Dust motes floated in a thin beam of light. The air smelled of earth and smoke. And then she saw it. On the floor in the corner, a second radio, its wires tangled, its switch still warm. Her blood ran cold. The boy on the ridge hadn't been alone. She froze, the realization spreading through her like fire. He had only been a voice, a decoy. Someone else had been listening, waiting. Her ears filled with static, though the radio was silent. A trap. It had always been a trap. The colonel's voice tore through her comms. Contact left, incoming fire. Gunshots erupted outside, shouts. The air split with chaos. She spun, bolting from the house, heart hammering. Dust exploded as rounds cracked against walls. Soldiers scattered, taking cover, returning fire. Carter dove behind a cart, his rifle clutched tight. The colonel barked orders drowned by the roar of battle. She dropped behind a low wall, chest heaving. Bullets snapped overhead. Children screamed from somewhere too close. The village erupted into a storm. And through it all, one thought drilled into her. The boy was only the beginning. She steadied her rifle, scanning rooftops. Movement flashed, muzzle flare. She fired, the recoil punching her shoulder. A body crumpled. But another shadow replaced it instantly. Her teeth clenched. For every shot, another enemy rose. Like the ridge, like the radio, like the memory that refused to die. Carter's voice cut through the chaos. They're flanking. She turned, spotting figures darting through the alleys, closing in. Too fast, too many. Her pulse surged. Her mind snapped to calculation. Angles, timing, distance, survival. And then amid the storm she heard something else. A voice. Distant, faint, carried through the crackle of enemy comms. She couldn't understand the words, but she knew the rhythm. Her blood froze. It was the same cadence she'd heard months ago. The same whisper that had led her men into fire. The boy's voice. Older now, sharper but the same. He was still alive. Her shot on the ridge hadn't ended him. She didn't know how. Maybe she'd only grazed him. Maybe he'd never been there at all. But he was here. And he was hunting them. Her breath came hard, ragged. She pressed her back to the wall, closing her eyes for a brief second, letting the truth settle like weight on her chest. She had fired, she had chosen, and still the past lived. Now in the storm of bullets and cries, one certainty cut sharper than the rest. This mission wasn't collapsing by accident. It was collapsing because of him. Because of her silence. Because history had never stopped repeating. What happens when the shot you take changes nothing? The village burned with sound, gunfire tearing through the air, voices shouting over each other, children screaming in the distance. Dust clouds rose with every burst of impact, and walls crumbled as if the earth itself was giving way. She crouched low, pressing her shoulder into the cracked wall, her rifle tight against her chest. Every breath burned hot, shallow. Her hands didn't shake, not yet, but her heart hammered so violently she thought it might echo loud enough to give her away. The voice still rang in her ears. The cadence, the whisper. It didn't matter that she couldn't make out the words. The rhythm was enough. It was him. She knew it the way one knows the smell of smoke, the taste of blood. Deep, undeniable, unshakable. The boy she hadn't killed, the boy she had spared. And now, he was the one directing the fire that rained on them. Carter's shout snapped her back. They're pushing through the east alley. She jerked her rifle up, scanning. Figures darted between shadows, rifles flashing. She squeezed the trigger. One dropped. Another scattered. Her muscles worked on instinct, cold, efficient. But her mind screamed louder, it's him. He's here, he survived. The colonel's voice bellowed through comms, ordering units to hold the line, calling for air support, his tone sharp with the weight of men dying under his command. She shifted to another corner, eyes cutting through dust and smoke. Every shadow was suspect. Every flicker could be him. She saw Carter pinned behind a cart, rounds ricocheting inches from his head. Without thinking, she broke cover, sprinting across the alley. Bullets hissed past, the ground exploding at her feet. She slid hard into the dirt beside him, yanking him down lower. "Keep your head below the axle," she barked. His eyes were wide, frantic. "They're everywhere." "Breathe," she cut him off, sharper than she meant. "You want to make it out? Listen to me. Breathe, one target at a time, nothing else matters." He swallowed hard, nodded, gripped his rifle tighter. She leaned around the wheel, sighting, firing. One hit, another. The rhythm of battle swallowed her, and for brief seconds she disappeared into it, into the necessity, into the survival. But every time the radio crackled, every time a distant voice cut through the noise, she froze. Because it was his voice, older, harder, but his. And she couldn't escape it. A sudden explosion tore the ground behind them. The cart jolted, flames licking the air. Carter coughed, smoke filling his lungs. She dragged him to his feet, shoving him toward the rubble of a collapsed wall. "Move!" They stumbled into cover, the roar of fire behind them. Debris rained down, clattering like bones against stone. For a moment, huddled against the shattered wall, Carter's face broke. Not the soldier's mask, but the boy beneath it. His voice cracked. "We're not getting out, are we?" She stared at him, dust streaked across his cheeks, fear burning raw in his eyes. And something inside her shifted. She saw another boy. The ridge, the radio, the one she couldn't kill, the one who now hunted them. Two boys, different sides, same wide eyes, same weight they should never have carried. She clenched her jaw, forced her voice steady. "You will, do you hear me? You're getting out." He shook his head, almost a whisper. "How can you be so sure?" She looked past him to the alley, to the smoke, to the chaos that had no end. She wasn't sure, not at all. But certainty wasn't what he needed. So she lied, soft but firm, "Because I said so." He stared at her, then nodded once, gripping his rifle again with a steadier hand. Gunfire cracked closer, shadows moved. The colonel's voice growled in her ear. "We're cut off. They want to bleed us dry. Hold your ground until I say otherwise." Hold your ground. As if ground meant anything here. As if it hadn't already been claimed by ghosts. She closed her eyes for half a second, steadying her breath. And then she made a decision. "Carter," she said quietly, "stay low. Watch my flank." Before he could protest, she was already moving. She darted through the alley, slipping between shadows, her body low, her rifle raised. Bullets cracked, stone chipped, sparks spat. But she kept moving. Because she wasn't hunting shadows anymore. She was hunting him. Every instinct told her to survive, to stay with the unit, to hold. But another pull, deeper, stronger, told her something else. This wouldn't end until she found him. Until she looked into the face she had spared and decided if she could pull the trigger again. The alleys twisted, narrow, claustrophobic. The smell of smoke thickened. The sound of battle muffled, then sharpened, then muffled again. And then there. A figure, tall now, older. His shoulders carried a rifle, but his hands held a radio. His head turned just enough for her to see the line of his face. Her chest clenched. It was him. No doubt. The boy had become a soldier. And his eyes, when they met hers across the alley, were not the wide, pleading eyes she remembered. They were colder, sharper, but beneath the steel she saw the same ache, the same burden. For a moment neither moved. Two rifles, two choices. Her breath slowed, her finger brushed the trigger. But something inside her cracked. Because she saw more than him. She saw Carter's face waiting in the rubble. She saw the men in the convoy. She saw the boy he used to be. And she felt the impossible truth pressing down on her. She wasn't just fighting him. She was fighting herself. The silence stretched. Then he lifted the radio. Her rifle snapped up. The alley exploded with noise, gunfire, shouts, dust kicking like thunder. But through it all, one truth burned in her chest. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a reckoning. And only one of them would walk out of it. What do you see when the past points a gun at you? The smoke thinned enough for her to catch his full shape now. He stood tall, lean, but hardened by the years she hadn't lived with him. His rifle was slung, not raised, but his radio hummed with command. The boy she once refused to kill had grown into someone who commanded killers. And his eyes, they were wrong. Not lifeless, not empty, worse. Alive, sharp, cold, as though every ounce of warmth had been scraped out and replaced with something carved from fire and iron. But even now, when he stared across the alley at her, the faintest tremor betrayed him. He knew her too. Time hadn't erased it. Her helmet pressed against the back of her skull, sweat soaking her brow beneath it. The rifle weighed like stone in her hands. She had seconds, maybe less, to decide. Kill him now, or let this unravel into something neither side could control. Her finger rested against the trigger, but she couldn't pull it. Not yet. Because for all the gunfire, for all the orders ringing through comms, for all the chaos tearing the village apart, there was silence here. A silence between them that drowned it all. He broke it first. You remember, his voice wasn't a question. It was lower now, harder, edged with command. But beneath the steel, she could hear the younger echo, the boy's voice that once begged her not to shoot. She swallowed, her throat raw. Yes. His jaw tightened. You should have killed me. Her chest clenched. The battlefield raged around them, but she felt pinned, heavier than under any sniper's scope. She steadied her breath, because if she cracked, even for a second, she'd lose him. I don't kill children, she said quietly. A bitter sound left him, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. Then you created this. His hand gestured to the burning streets, the falling buildings, the men bleeding in the dust. All of this, every drop, you made it. Her stomach turned. His words hit harder than shrapnel, because somewhere in the part of her mind that never stopped replaying that day, she'd thought the same. Carter's voice crackled in her ear through comms, frantic, distant. We're pinned. We need. Static swallowed the rest. Her hand twitched. The rifle stayed level. You think this is your war, he went on, stepping closer, his voice sharper with each word. Your cause, you've been fed orders, told who to fight, told what to believe. You spared me because you thought it meant something. But it only gave me time, time to see what you really are. His boots crunched over broken stone. He didn't raise his rifle. He didn't need to. The truth was already a weapon. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. And what are we then, to you? His gaze didn't waver. Invaders, executioners, the hand that pressed the blade to my people's throat. You. The weight of it pressed down, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't. If she gave him that, it was over. She adjusted her grip, her voice tightening. You think becoming what you hate makes you free. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. A shadow of doubt quickly smothered. He took another step. Don't lecture me on freedom, he spat. I learned freedom when you aimed at my head and hesitated. I learned it when I saw what weakness looked like, and I swore I'd never make the same mistake. His hand finally brushed the rifle at his side. Every nerve in her body screamed. Through the calm, Carter's voice bled again, broken but desperate. "Please, we can't hold much longer." Her mind split in two. Carter clinging to survival, the colonel barking commands, the boy before her transformed into the enemy she created. And inside her chest, the old question, was mercy a sin, or the only thing left that made her human? She steadied her stance, voice low but fierce. "If you think killing me will end this, you're wrong. It'll never end for you, not like this." His lips pressed into a thin line. His knuckles whitened against his rifle. For a moment his mask cracked. Just a moment. And she saw him, the boy on the ridge, dirt-streaked, voice trembling, begging for his life. And she realized the truth. He wasn't just her reckoning. He was hers too. Their war was bound by that one choice years ago, a circle that neither bullets nor orders could break. And now one of them would have to. The silence tightened. The battle's roar faded to a dull hum. Her rifle aimed. His hand lifted his weapon. The air between them shook. And then, a scream tore through comms, Carter's voice, high, panicked, raw. "They're inside there." Static. Her head whipped sideways, instinct overriding everything. Carter. He was just a boy and he was dying. Her enemy's eyes sharpened. He saw her crack. And in that instant, the choice was no longer between them. It was Carter. Her mercy once spared a boy who became a commander. Could she make the same mistake twice? Her chest heaved. The rifle trembled against her grip. The boy she spared raised his weapon. The boy she swore to protect screamed for her through static. And she knew, one way or another, she was about to damn herself again. Do you know the sound of betrayal when it splits the air? It isn't loud, not at first. It begins like a faint crack, the snapping of something too tight, too strained, a silence breaking, and then it rushes outward, gunfire, screams, the storm of decisions no one can take back. That was the sound that followed her choice. She turned. Her rifle swung toward the alley where Carter's desperate cry had vanished. And in the heartbeat it took her to move. The boy she once spared, no, the commander he had become, moved too. A muzzle flash ripped through the smoke. The bullet screamed past her cheek, so close the heat burned her skin. Stone splintered beside her. She didn't stop. Couldn't. Carter's voice wasn't just a sound, it was an anchor, dragging her across broken ground, forcing her forward. She vaulted over rubble, boots slipping in dust, lungs tearing open with each breath. Behind her, the commander shouted an order in his native tongue. Not rage, precision. His men answered. Gunfire ignited like a second sunrise. She hit the corner, shoulder slamming against a crumbling wall. Carter. She found him crouched in the shadow of a collapsed arch, his rifle empty, his face smeared with blood that wasn't all his. His eyes met hers, wide with something worse than fear, shame. "I lost it," he choked. "I dropped, I had to reload." She grabbed him, hauling him against the wall as bullets shredded the air above them. Stone rained down in sharp, stinging fragments. "You're alive," she snapped, voice harsher than she meant. Her hand pressed against his chest, feeling the frantic hammer of his heartbeat. "That's all that matters." But she knew it wasn't true. Not with the commander closing in. The radio in Carter's vest hissed. The colonel's voice, distant, ragged, barely cutting through static. "Falling back, can't hold, where the hell are you two?" She couldn't answer. Not with the enemy sweeping closer, not with Carter half broken, not with her own past stalking her through the smoke. Her eyes flicked toward the alley. Shadows moved within it, disciplined, quick, his men closing. And then she heard his voice again. Not shouted, spoken, calm, deliberate. "Leave him, face me." Her stomach twisted. She should have shot him the moment she saw him, ended it clean. But no, she'd hesitated, just like before, and now every choice was tangled in the same knot of mercy and consequence. Carter tugged her sleeve, panic cutting through his voice. "He's talking to you. Who is he? Why is he? Not now. Her voice cracked sharper than she intended. She couldn't let Carter see what this really was. Not yet. But the boy deserved the truth, didn't he? Another bullet slammed the wall inches from Carter's head. He flinched, eyes wide, his hands shaking as he tried to reload with trembling fingers. She covered his hands with hers, steadying them, guiding the magazine home. Her chest burned, her mind screamed. Two boys, one past, one present, both her responsibility. She had seconds to choose. A shadow detached from the smoke, stepping forward. His rifle wasn't raised. It hung at his side, casual, almost ceremonial. The commander. His men spread out behind him, rifles trained. But they didn't fire, not yet. He wanted her. She knew it, felt it in her bones. This wasn't strategy anymore. This was something older, sharper, a reckoning. Her voice cracked through the silence, rough and raw. If you want me, take me. Leave him. Carter's head whipped toward her. What? No, you can't. But the commander only tilted his head, studying her. For a moment, the faintest ghost of that boy's expression flickered in his eyes. Confusion, pain, the memory of being spared. Then it was gone. You don't get to choose terms, he said coldly. Not anymore. He raised his rifle. And the world detonated. Gunfire roared. Carter screamed. She shoved him down, rolled across shattered stone, her rifle barking fire into the smoke. Shadows dropped, one, two, but more filled the gap. Her ears rang, her throat raw with dust, her finger blistering against the trigger. The commander didn't flinch. His rifle tracked her like he'd been waiting his whole life to pull that trigger. And maybe he had. She snapped behind cover, heart tearing at her ribs. Carter crawled beside her, bleeding, cursing, his voice breaking between gasps. We're not making it out, he panted. Her hand gripped his shoulder. Yes, we are. He shook his head, eyes wild. You don't get it, he's not after me, he's after you. What the hell did you do to him? Her chest clenched. She wanted to tell him, wanted to spill the truth and let it bleed between them. But the words stuck, because the truth wasn't salvation, it was damnation. She had spared one boy once, and it had birthed this. Now she was trying to save another. And it would cost her everything. The commander's voice cut through the chaos, steady as stone. This is where it ends. And she knew he wasn't talking about the battle. Her breath caught, her finger tightened on the trigger. The past and the present, colliding in the ruins. No more hesitation. One boy, one bullet. And a silence that would decide who carried the burden next. Have you ever known in a single heartbeat that you were already gone? It wasn't fear, not really. Fear was sharp, frantic, clawing. This was quieter, heavy, like the sound of earth falling onto a grave, steady, inescapable. That was the sound inside her chest when she looked at Carter, bleeding and desperate, and then at the commander, eyes cold with the memory of her mercy. She couldn't save them both. She'd known it the moment she heard Carter's cry through static, but knowing didn't make it easier. The air boiled with gunfire, but her mind slowed it down. Each crack, each flash stretched into silence. She could see Carter's lips moving, shouting her name, begging her not to do something. But the sound didn't reach her. All she heard was the echo of that day years ago. The boy's breath ragged, his eyes wide. His words, please don't. And her finger easing off the trigger. Mercy. The choice that created this moment. Her jaw tightened, she steadied her breath. And she stood. Carter's hand clutched at her vest, dragging, pleading. His voice finally broke through the noise. Please don't do this. Her hand pressed his down, firm, almost gentle. Stay low. She stepped out from cover. The gunfire faltered. The commander's men froze at their leader's silence. Dust hung in the air like breath held too long. She raised her rifle, slowly, deliberately, and aimed it not at him but at the ground between them. A shot cracked, sharp and final. Stone burst into dust. Silence followed. Her voice carried through the smoke, low, steady, a thread pulled tight. This isn't about soldiers, not anymore. This is between us. The commander's jaw clenched. His rifle lifted higher until the muzzle stared at her heart. He didn't order his men forward, didn't wave them back. Because he wanted this too. She saw it in his eyes, not hatred alone, but hunger, for an ending, for the circle to close. Her breath trembled once, then steadied. She thought of Carter, half-conscious behind her, blood painting his sleeve. She thought of the colonel, somewhere in the ruins, still fighting, still waiting. And then she thought of the boy. Not the commander before her, the boy she had spared, the boy who had begged for life, who had carried her mercy like a brand. She whispered, so quiet it almost vanished, "I should have pulled the trigger." And then she did. The shot tore through the air. Not at his chest, not at his head. Her bullet struck the ground by his feet. His eyes widened just for a fraction, and in that crack, that tiny human break, she moved. She broke cover, stepping fully into the open, drawing every rifle, every scope, every ounce of attention onto her. Her voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. "Go." Carter's gasp tore behind her. "No." But her body was already in motion. She fired again, high, wide, forcing their rifles up, drawing their eyes. The commander's weapon tracked her, locked, inevitable. Her feet pounded against stone. Her breath ripped through her chest. Every step was a choice. Every shot she fired a delay. Every second a gift she carved with her life. Behind her, she heard Carter move, dragging himself toward another alley, away from the fire, toward the slim chance of survival she was buying him. Good. That was enough. The commander's voice cut through the storm. A single word, a command. Now. Gunfire ripped into her. The first impact stole her breath. The second buckled her knee. By the third, the world tilted sideways. She collapsed onto shattered stone, rifle slipping from her grasp. The sky above spun, smoke and fire blurring into a single, burning canvas. Her blood spread warm beneath her, heavy, endless. Boots approached, slow, deliberate. The commander stopped above her, rifle aimed down. His men ringed them, silent, waiting. She forced her eyes open, locking on his. And for the first time she saw the boy again. Not the commander, not the killer, just the boy, the one she had spared, the one who had carried her hesitation like a curse. Her lips moved, the words barely more than breath. "It doesn't end with me." His jaw tightened, his finger hovered against the trigger. But he didn't fire. Not yet. Because mercy, once given, doesn't die easy. And in that flicker of hesitation, Carter's voice cracked through calms, faint, distant, alive. She's down, but I'm moving, I'll finish, I'll." She closed her eyes. Relief bled through the pain. She had bought him time. And that was enough. Her breath slowed, the noise of battle faded, all that remained was silence. A silence that didn't belong to death, but to choice. Do you know what lingers after war? Not the gunfire, not the smoke, not even the bodies. It's the silence. The kind that clings to the edges of memory. The kind that returns at night when the world should be at peace but is. Carter knew that silence now. He stumbled through the ruins, blood soaking his sleeve, the echo of her last command burning in his chest. Go. He hadn't wanted to. God, he hadn't. He fought against it, clawed against the weight of leaving her behind. But her voice had been iron, final. And now he was alone. The village had collapsed into a graveyard of stone and ash. Fires crackled weakly. The roar of battle had drifted elsewhere, swallowed by the larger fight. Here, only ghosts remained. He limped toward where he'd last seen her fall. His rifle dangled useless in his hand, his legs trembling. Every step felt like betrayal. And then he saw her. She lay sprawled on the broken ground, her rifle just out of reach, her vest torn, her blood dark against pale dust. But her face was calm, not slack, not empty, calm. Like someone who had finally set down a weight too heavy to carry. Carter dropped to his knees beside her, breath tearing from his lungs. His shaking hands reached for her shoulder, her wrist, her pulse. Nothing. His throat closed, his chest convulsed. He wanted to scream, wanted to pound the earth until it broke, wanted to drag her back into the world she had given him. But all he could do was kneel there, the silence wrapping around him like chains. And then, a shadow. He looked up. The commander stood a few feet away, his rifle still in his hands. His men hovered behind him, silent, waiting. Carter's heart lurched, his hand tightened on his rifle. But the commander didn't raise his weapon. His eyes were locked on her. Not with victory, not with hatred. With something else. Something that looked too close to grief. Carter's voice cracked raw. You killed her." The commander's gaze flicked to him. For a moment their eyes met. And Carter saw it, the truth carved deep inside him. No, he hadn't. Not really. She had chosen. The commander's jaw tightened. He lowered his rifle, slowly, deliberately. His men shifted uneasily, but he didn't look at them. His eyes lingered on her one last time. And then he turned. Without a word, he walked back into the smoke. His men followed, their boots crunching over stone, their shadows swallowed by fire and dust. Until Carter was alone again. Alone with her. His chest heaved. His throat ached. He pressed his forehead against her vest, dust stinging his eyes until he couldn't tell tears from ash. He wanted to hate her for leaving him, wanted to hate her for choosing silence over survival. But he couldn't, because he understood now. Mercy had cursed her, but mercy had also saved him. And sometimes that was the only choice left. The radio at his side crackled weakly, the colonel's voice ragged, barely holding. "Carter, report, do you copy?" Carter swallowed hard. His voice broke as he pressed the transmitter. "She's gone." Static hissed, then silence. He looked at her one last time, his hand resting over hers, his blood mixing with hers in the dust. And then he forced himself to stand. His legs shook, his chest felt hollow. But he stood, because that was what she had bought with her last breath. And as he limped into the ruins, leaving her behind, the silence followed him. A silence that wasn't empty. It was dignity. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.